Alright guys, so this is your update on the financial apocalypse and things have happened. The Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, has just made their decision. They're gonna dump mBridge and this will go down in history as one of the most pivotal mistakes. The economic war today is being fought on multiple fronts. We have tariffs on electric vehicles, semiconductor bans, and price caps on Russian oil. The US, for example, is bent on pursuing a trade war with China, bringing home manufacturing at all costs.
These are the same experts that said shipping our entire manufacturing industry to China, to East Asia, to Mexico would lead to greater American prosperity. They were wrong. It was a mistake to do that. We followed their advice, and now, frankly, a lot of Americans can't afford a good life, can't earn a middle-class wage because we listened to some of those very same people.
Now, this will be a hot button topic, but I would argue the most important aspect is the flow of money, controlling how and where your competitors and adversaries transact. If you can maintain your grip on this, yes, you can influence global trade to a huge degree. Turkish banks, for example, are wary of dealing with Russian trade. They are scared of US sanctions hitting them and disrupting operations. The majority of trade today goes through Western intermediary banks. Whether it's a US entity or EU bank, money flows through them. And if you're a Turkish bank, you might think twice about increasing trade. As a decision maker in Washington, the last thing you want to lose is financial hegemony. It's one of the few things you have left. You mustn't compromise the status of the dollar. Your industries are already collapsing, plus your debt levels are insanely high. You need the world to use your currencies and recycle their earnings back into Western assets. And this is where China is starting to gain ground. Even within SWIFT itself, the Chinese yuan is becoming a dominant currency to finance trade. While the US dollar is still dominant at 83%, the euro and China's RMB is almost on par, both at around 5.7%. Countries around the world, even on the SWIFT platform, they are choosing to use China's currency more and more, and it makes sense. China is the biggest trading partner to the majority of the world, but the West just made a very critical error. We heard a few days ago that the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, is going to exit the mBridge payments project. The majority of participants are countries in the BRICS, and there was a freakout here. The moment they heard Putin identify it as a conduit for de-dollarization, the BIS wanted out. The Bank of International Settlements is now officially dumping the project. They are leaving it to BRICS to pick up the pieces. mBridge will now be run by the remaining members, and this includes China, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Understand how big of a mistake this is for the West. The mBridge system is supposed to be a black box for trade. It connects central banks with each other and bypasses the need for any commercial intermediary. This is a Minsky moment for Western currencies and payment systems. It's a very pivotal moment where things start to take an ugly turn for them. mBridge is now effectively in Chinese hands. Beijing, they supply the platform's backbone and technology, so they can always connect it to other parts of their financial network. A great example is HSBC joining China's alternative to SWIFT, the CIPS payment system. It connects commercial banks, financial institutions, and companies together. It allows commercial entities to do business with China even if SWIFT cuts the country away. So now you have a marriage of central bank to central bank plus commercial entities around the world to China. And this can be done without any oversight from the BIS, which means everything will be under the radar going forward. What's frightening for the West is the other members, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. We can be sure China is going to start using mBridge to settle oil trade outside of dollars. In September, the Saudi Minister of Industry emphasized how Saudi Arabia is open to the idea of a Petroyuan. To build closer ties with China, the kingdom is willing to sell barrels of oil not for dollars, but for the Chinese RMB. Now, this hasn't been done officially yet. There's still big instability in the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia can't afford to do this in public yet. They still need US protection, especially with the Iran-Israel conflict today. But the mBridge system just makes things easier. Payments between central banks can be done, and the G7 will be none the wiser. The BIS made a big mistake here. Now, if I was the US, I would want to monitor what the Chinese are doing with mBridge. But now any progress will be made in the dark. China consumes a ton of oil from the Middle East. No surprise, we all know that. And with that comes quite a bit of leverage. Beijing is the biggest buyer of Saudi oil exports. Since 2021, sales have been flying up. China has been buying around $50 billion of oil annually, and that's almost 85% of their total imports from the kingdom. Now that mBridge is in the hands of China and the Saudis, what do you think is the most rational path going forward? Especially when there's now no oversight. Won't be surprising if their central banks start coordinating with each other and they start beginning arranging oil for Yuan trades. The Petroyuan idea is now much more feasible. But there's another shocking piece of news to talk about, and that is India bringing home their gold. The Reserve Bank of India has relocated over 100 tons of their gold back to domestic vaults. It's a very big withdrawal and it's a significant sign of things to come. Gold is a very simple asset with one simple rule. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. London might be the financial center for gold, but it doesn't matter. They have the biggest vaults and the largest gold exchange in the world, but India, they still withdrew their reserves and they have a ton more to ship back home. India has around 860 tons of gold, but only 510 are stored domestically. So more gold from the UK will likely be flown back. India used to keep their gold in London as collateral to raise money for their economy. The bullion, it sits in a vault, while other central banks, they write checks to the RBI with the gold as backing. India's debt has been paid off for decades, but the gold still sat in the UK in the vaults. Now, the RBI says it's an accounting move and not political, but we know that countries around the world, they are repatriating their gold. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Indigo Precious Metals. When it comes to investing in gold and silver, I trust Indigo Precious Metals in Singapore. They have made buying precious metals safe, fast, and easy for investors, whether you're making small purchases or large-scale investments. With gold prices steadily rising, ensuring you buy authentic gold at competitive prices is crucial. And as inflation shows no sign of slowing down, precious metals continue to be a reliable store of value. Whether you're purchasing by the ounce, the kilo, or saving up by the gram, Indigo Precious Metals helps you maximize your investment no matter your budget. The best part, you can test your coins or bars on site, giving you complete peace of mind. As a leading retailer and bullion dealer in Singapore for gold, silver, and platinum, they are your go-to source. If you're considering your first gold, silver, or platinum purchase, there's no better place to begin than Indigo Precious Metals. For this month only, you can get a 100-ounce silver bar at less than 3% premium. Stocks are limited. So if you're looking to buy silver, this is a great promotion to really consider. And with my code Sean Fu, enjoy a further discount on your first purchase. So start building your gold and silver stack today. Since the start of the year, gold has returned at least 30%. The price went from around $2,000 to over $2,750 today, and that's a very big gain. And if you're a central bank looking at the chaos in the world, you want your gold at home. The value of your gold is now much more higher, and no matter how friendly you are with the UK or the US, you might be on the receiving end of financial sanctions. Let's not forget the curious case of Venezuela's gold. They still have a huge amount stuck in the UK. Venezuela has around $2 billion stuck in London. It's a long legal battle that's still going on. The UK doesn't recognize Maduro as president, so they aren't releasing the gold. It's a really messy situation and it's a reminder of the basic rule when it comes to owning gold. If you don't hold it, you really don't own it. Now that India doesn't have any debt owed to the UK and the gold isn't collateral to a loan, best thing to do is to take it back home. No point leaving it in London and subjecting yourself to counterparty risk. And this brings us back to the main topic at hand, the BIS dumping what's left of mBridge to China. It's going to be a mistake that will haunt the West. Remember the consequences of bilateral trade outside of Western currencies. There will be a lesser need to hold traditional reserve assets. We'll see less demand for treasury bonds and even more demand for gold. Over the past 2 years, we have seen Russian reserves getting confiscated, Russia getting kicked out of SWIFT, and not forgetting an increase in tariffs on Chinese trade. The entire financial system, is being used for geopolitical outcomes, and central banks all over the world, they aren't too happy about this. In an Invesco survey, central banks all over the world gave a big rebuke to the Western financial order. The biggest pushback came from central banks in Asia and the emerging markets. China is definitely on the list. They found weaponization of reserves is a big risk to US dollar dominance. Even Western central banks find this a problem as well. Countries in Eastern Europe like Hungary probably have problems sleeping at night after 2022. You could be a good friend of the US or the G7 today, but tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and your reserves in dollar assets could really disappear like a cheap magic trick. Over the next few years, central banks they've indicated they will increase their reserves. 37% of respondents will buy more. 63% will maintain their holdings, but none of them will sell any gold. And if this isn't a hint, I don't know what else is. Now, the survey takes a very interesting turn. They ask central banks about why they're holding gold, and yes, they ask the Voldemort question, the unspeakable question. Does the weaponization of central bank reserves increase the attractiveness of gold? Out of 45 surveyed, the majority said yes. Over half agreed that gold is more attractive thanks to the G7 sanctions. It's a bigger reason than even the rising US debt levels. Getting your reserves confiscated away is a bigger risk than the odds of a sovereign debt default. Knowing this, we can project quite a few things into the future. The gold market would continue being supported by central bank buying. It could even increase in 2025 if the US makes a move on China and weaponizes the financial system again. We could see demand explode. Central banks would buy more bullion, and I'm quite sure they won't be storing it in a vault in New York or London. They will take the gold reserves back home with them, is the only logical thing to do. So we have to watch the economic war closely. China and Russia, they are building their own financial network outside the West. And with mBridge now in Eastern hands, we have no idea the amount of trade that will happen outside of the dollar. For all we know, the Saudis might sell oil to China and settle in the RMB. Now, what's unambiguous is the amount of reserves being held in dollars. According to the IMF, dollar holdings peaked out at 66% back in 2015, but it has been collapsing since. Today, it's only 58%. During the same period, the price of gold has been climbing thanks to central bank buying. Not a coincidence either. It looks like a slow burn process, but Trump is the ultimate wild card in 2025, and chances are he'll win. And with him comes the ultimate threat. Move away from the dollar and the US will punish you. So hang tight guys, things are going to escalate to new crazy heights. But let me know what you think. Did the West make a big mistake with mBridge, and how will China turn this situation around? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.